Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the short sale webinar today. This webinar is being recorded, so if you did want to have a look at it later, you will be able to do that. We will have it posted somewhere on our website, and we can provide you with that information later on. So for those of you that are listening to the recorded version of the webinar, thank you so much for joining us. And please note that some of the information that I'm presenting today may change. So if you're listening to it as a recording, that information may have changed already. We're going to talk about how there are certain things that if you know them about short sales and how to work short sales, they can really help you not only in your entire real estate career, but in order to cement some short sale listings for you. Right now, there are still 10.3 million borrowers who are over 25% underwater on their mortgages. This is according to Realty Track and a report that came out in September of 2013. And there are another 8 million or so borrowers who are kind of flat, I'll call them flatlining, between 95% and 110% on their mortgage. So depending on how the market is, they're just about even. Of course, with the changes to the real estate market right now, and we have seen some improvement, those people may be in a good position some months down the road if the mortgage market and if the real estate market continues to improve. So we're going to get started with the webinar, but before we do, I just wanted to show you the Short Sale Expediter website. If you are a short sale specialist and you do have questions about processing short sales, this site has lots and lots of good information for you. There are 600 or 700 articles on the site, and you can access those articles over here on the side. Right here, there's a search bar. So if you had a certain topic that you were really interested in learning more about, or you were challenged by, this would be a great way to search for that. So if you had something like HalfA short sale, well, HalfA short sale looks like one that I've typed in before. So you could search like that. And here you have a list of a lot of articles that discuss HalfA short sales. So you can utilize that tool to get more information about something that's brewing or something that you're thinking about. And there might be topics that we discussed today about which you do want more information. So I would encourage you to go back to the Short Sale Expediter website, which is shortsaleexpediter.com, in order to seek that out and look those things up. And I may refer to things on the website that you can look up to help you really fuel your real estate information and career and kind of get supercharged about short sales. So there are, as I mentioned, because of the statistics, still quite a number of people that may need your help today. So don't discount that for the end of the year and for 2014 as well. So now that we've got some more people that have joined us, thank you so much for coming and joining us for our webinar today. If you have questions, do write them in the question area, and I will be happy to answer them either as I'm going through or at the very end, depending on how they come up and if they're applicable to the screen, the slide that I have on the screen. So let's get started. So you're on here because you probably want to learn how to instantly increase your income with top secret short sale information that every agent needs to know. And I'm happy to provide that to you today. My name is Melissa Zavala, and I am a broker in San Diego County. And my team and I have closed between 1,500 and 2,000 short sales since 2008. And what we do is we provide short sale processing services to agents throughout California and far beyond. But most of our clients are from California, as well as free distressed property education to agents across the nation. We're a group of intense and detailed paper pushers. That's what we love. And since many, many agents prefer to be in the field than pushing paper and hanging out on the phone, it's a great win-win for everybody. If you are ever in a situation where you're working on a short sale and you're not sure what to do, or you just hit a bump in the road and you can't get past it, you are always welcome to call our office at 760-839-3838 or send us an email at info@shortsaleexpediter.com, and we'll be more than happy to give you some thoughts and ideas there's really something very cathartic about sharing your troubles when it comes to real estate and short sales with another person who's been down that road before or is down that road almost daily. And we can help each other to see great success in short sales, and we are more than happy to do that. So save that information. You may not need it now, but you may need it later. And we're more than happy to address any of your short sale questions, either via phone or via email. Now, I was thinking just now about a problem that we're having on a short sale right now, which is a Chase short sale, and it's just been a real nightmare. You know, there was a task in Equator, and we completed the task, and then the Chase said they couldn't see the task on the other end, and for almost a month, we've been fighting with them, with their tech department, to show them that we've done our part, and it's just one hurdle after another, and it's getting us stressed out, and agents do feel very, very stressed out by short sales. They really take time away from your ability to be out in the field generating new business. So I think it's important to know that you do have a team behind the scenes to help you with your short sales. So today, oh, by the way, I'm a broker. I'm not an attorney or an accountant. And so many of the situations that I'm going to describe are for educational purposes only. And I certainly would advise you to have your clients always seek the advice of an attorney or an accountant. Today, we're going to talk about the top 5 things which I've identified as things that agents need to know based on my experience helping agents to close 1,500 to 2,000 short sales. And they are, you have to absolutely have to know the foreclosure process for your state. If I say 2 plus 2, you already know the answer is 4. So the same speed you need to be able to use in order to identify and understand the foreclosure process for your own state. Another thing that you need to be familiar with are the local and federal laws affecting the distressed property market. So we're going to discuss all of these points today, but these are incredibly important points. When we talk about instantly increasing your income, with this knowledge, you will. Because you can go out to that listing appointment, and when they ask you, what do you know about PNC, second liens, you can say, oh, I know that sometimes they ask for a lot of money and they're not as easy to work with. You'll know that, and that's really, really going to put you a cut above the rest. The third thing that we're going to talk about is the tax and legal consequences of short sales. Again, I'm not an attorney or an accountant, but I'm going to give you a passing familiarity with the main topics related to tax and legal consequences so you can really work with your client in order to identify when they would need to speak with an attorney or an accountant. And also, we're going to talk about the major players. So by that, I mean the major lenders and their programs. Every time I do this webinar, it's always different because depending on what new incentive program there is and which one went away and what changes there are to HalfA and things like that, all that stuff impacts how you help your clients and what we talk about and what you need to know about short sales in order to be successful. So we're going to spend some time talking about that. And the last thing on my list, and one of my favorite topics, is how to conduct due diligence activities on your short sale listings. There are certain things that you can do before or at the time of taking the listing that can save you hours and hours of time. So we're going to go over those, and I'm going to show you how to identify deals that may not ever close so that you can really put your energy into increasing your success and subsequently and additionally your income for the end of 2013 and of course 2014 as well. So let's get started. So the first thing on my list was the foreclosure process. And it's just really, really vital that you understand the foreclosure process for your state. Now, in just a minute, I'm going to go over the foreclosure process for the state of California, since I've identified that most of our callers are from California. However, if you're calling in from outside of California, there are a few great sites where you can get some information about the foreclosure process for your state, and RealtyTrack and foreclosures.com are 2 of those sites. Now, You do not need to be a member. Those are membership sites, but you don't need to be membered in order to see those pages that go over the process. So feel free to go there and use those. Those are very, very useful tools. Now, in your state, in our state, California, we use something called non-judicial foreclosure, but there are many, many states in the United States that have a foreclosure process that involves what's called judicial foreclosure, meaning going to court and getting an order in order to foreclose on the property. A lot of things that have happened in the news over the last several years, and you've probably heard about them, you know, the settlements, the problems with people foreclosing without proving that they actually owned the note. Most of those things were happening in states that had judicial foreclosure filings. And again, California is not one of those states. We are a non-judicial foreclosure state. So when you do hear things in the news about something that's going on with foreclosure, I urge you to pry a little bit further and identify whether this is something that is only happening in a judicial foreclosure state, or if it also, you know, is related to non-judicial foreclosure states as well. So have a look at that. The California foreclosure process, the one, and I insist again that you must know this like the back of your hand, involves 3 missed payments. So let's just say hypothetically that in December of last year, Scooby-Doo called me on the telephone and he had lost his job as a detective. And so he cannot afford to make mortgage payments any longer, and he's going to sell his home as a short sale. So he's going to miss his January mortgage payment, his February mortgage payment, and his March mortgage payment. So at the end of March, so the 1st of April, he will have missed 3 payments and their grace periods would have been over. And that is the earliest period of time by which a lender can begin their foreclosure process. And they begin that process by filing a notice of default. And the notice of default, that's something that's recorded at the county recorder's office. So then if you work with title folks and you have access to, through your MLS, to data, you can often see whether that notice of default has been filed just by logging in on your computer. And when the notice of default has been filed, so for Scooby-Doo, let's just say it was filed on April 1st after he missed his 3 payments, there is a 90-day redemption period. And at the end of that, okay, during that period, then that's when generally when most people begin to consider a loan modification and short sale and what their options might be if they're going to lose their home to foreclosure. So although a short sale listing can be taken when a seller is still current on their mortgage, it can also be taken, you know, before when they've just missed 1 payment or 2 payments. Most clients or most of your clients will be people that probably are already involved in the foreclosure process, meaning after the notice of default has been filed. So that has to be filed, and that redemption period has to last for 90 days. And at the end of those 90 days, then there is what's called a publication period of 21 days. At the end of the 90 days, the notice of trustee sale is published. And it has to be published for a minimum of 21 days. So 21 days later, then the bank can have an auction or sell the property at auction, or it will revert back to the bank. So in the case of Scooby-Doo, his 90-day redemption period began on April 1st. So it's all of April, all of May, and all of June. And then around July 1st, they filed that notice of trustee sale for 21 days. So the earliest time period for Scooby-Doo's foreclosure would have been around July 21st, assuming that it was between a Monday and a Friday, there were no holidays, things like that. So this is the earliest possible time period. But I know that there are many callers on the line right now who have met people who've missed 5 or 10 or even 15 payments on their mortgage and are still in their house and nothing has happened. So if you meet one of those people and they want to get rid of their home in a short sale, or if they want to do a loan modification or whatever they're thinking of doing, I urge you to check whether that notice of default has been filed. Sometimes it hasn't. And if it has not, of course, the official foreclosure process doesn't begin in the state of California until that notice of default has been filed. So it would be 3 months plus 21 days from when the notice of default is filed, and that's not always filed after the 3 missed payments, as in the case of Scooby-Doo it was, but maybe in your client's case it might be 8 months down the road. So when people call me on the phone and they say, Melissa, I want to list my house as a short sale. If I'm by my computer, what's the address? Give me the address right now. And I go to my MLS, and I can access the tax rolls and the public records through my MLS. I click on a button, I put in the address, and it will tell me if there's been any foreclosure filings yet. So I really know what I'm up against. And that's really, really helpful, because if it reveals to me that the trustee sale is tomorrow, it's probably too late for me to help someone avoid foreclosure. So I need to know what I'm up against. I need to know what the dates are. I need to have all that information going into the process, which is exactly why I say that you need to understand the process, just like you know that 2 + 2 = 4. So I urge you to be very familiar with the process for your state if you're a caller that's not from California. The second thing that is really, really helpful to know are the local and federal laws, which are constantly changing with regard to short sales. And that's because when you go to a short sale listing, you are going to be hammered by a prospective seller on these facts. So the first thing is the foreclosure moratorium. We've got holidays coming, and people, oftentimes the lenders have either stopped foreclosing or they would continue to foreclose, but they won't evict people during the holidays. There are all sorts of different foreclosure moratoria that you may hear about on the news, and your client may hear about on the news, and you need to be aware of them, because the client may say, well, I don't want to list right now because I heard that Fannie Mae's not foreclosing. Well, they may not be foreclosing between Christmas and New Year's, but of course the day after New Year's, your prospective client may lose his home. So it's important to just be generally aware of those. Right now, to the best of my knowledge, there's nothing going on in the United States related to that. But with the holidays coming, listen for that on the news, because they always seem to be doing something with that. The next thing you'll want to have a good familiarity with are the anti-deficiency bills in your state. So in the state of California, in July of 2011, our governor signed into law this really helpful anti-deficiency bill, which said that if a seller sells his home in a short sale, then any lien holders who have agreed to the short sale cannot go after the seller after closing for the amount that they are still owed. So, for example, if the second lien holder on a short sale was owed $100,000 and receives $10,000 in the short sale, they cannot go after the seller for the other $90,000. And that was part of Senate Bill 458, and that took effect on July 15th of 2011. So people always are asking, is the bank going to come after me? So if you're calling in from another state, be familiar with the anti-deficiency bills in your state. Is the bank going to be able to go after the sellers? Now, if you live in a state which does not have any anti-deficiency bills or laws, I would recommend that you work carefully with whoever's doing the short sale processing, or if it's you, really pay careful attention to the short sale approval letter, because that's where the banks say what their intentions are with respect to the short sale. So that's where they might say we waive the right to pursue deficiency, or we will still continue to pursue deficiency on the amount owed. And you can actually negotiate to have that deficiency language removed and have them say that they waive the right to pursue deficiency. So that's something that you might have to work on if you do not live in a state that has anti-deficiency laws. Another thing that you're going to be asked about is this California Homeowner Bill of Rights. It's really protective of the homeowner, and people might hear that because of this California Homeowner Bill of Rights, they cannot be foreclosed on in a short sale. But that's not quite right. What the California Homeowner Bill of Rights says is that with respect to a short sale, if there's an approval from all of the different lenders involved in the short sale, and escrow is open and the property's already had the appraisal, then they will stop the sale. So if you've only just gotten your documents to the bank, The bank is not compelled by California state law to stop the sale. Now, California Homeowner Bill of Rights also talks about loan modification, and they do say that if the bank has all of the documents for loan modification, then, and you can confirm that, then they are supposed to stop the sale. The third thing that that may happen is that the California Homeowner Bill of Rights talks about a single point of contact. So it requires that everybody involved in a short sale or loan modification have a single point of contact at the bank. So oftentimes I've seen letters from IndyMac fairly recently where they say, "Hi, my name is so-and-so, and I'm your contact." And basically they're the team leader and they're working on a gazillion short sales. But they, the reason that letter is sent out is to cover the law that says that there needs to be a single point of contact for everything and every, I guess, loss mitigation filing process. Another thing that you probably want to have some familiarity with is the government loan modification and short sale options. Right now, this is the main way that sellers across the nation can still get some incentive money by participating in a short sale. Most of the biggest programs are gone right now. So this is the main program. The HalfA program is the main program offering a moving incentive money in short sale, a deed in lieu of foreclosure. So the programs that the government has right now are the HalfA Program, which is the Home Affordable Foreclosure Alternatives Program, the HAMP Program, Home Affordable Modification Program, the HARP Program, Home Affordable Refinance Program, and that's the second version, is called 2.0. And then something else I'm going to talk about in a minute called Independent Foreclosure Review. I'm also going to talk about FHA programs and FHA streamline modifications. But let's start by talking about these modification programs. So the HAMP program is a government modification program. It's not for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac loans, and it's been around for a while, and it's got some qualifying guidelines. But the bottom line is, and the thing that unfortunately many borrowers do not understand, is you need to have enough income to qualify to do a modification. Now, once the modification has been, they first get a trial period, and if they make it through the trial period and pay on time, then it's very likely that they will be able to get their modification. Just last week, I saw an article that said that 27% of all of the modifications completed have had redefault. So there is a high redefault rate on these modifications. Now, in order to have the modification completed, 100% completed, and a thing that a lot of people don't know is that the bank has to send out a package of new loan docs, which the borrower has to take and get signed with a notary and then send back to the bank. So if someone thinks they've done a modification, but they've never signed any official documents and don't have a copy of them, then they have not. What they maybe have is a forbearance agreement, or they're in the trial period. So they really do not have a completed modification. The HARP 2.0 program is a program that was for responsible borrowers, people who were upside down or underwater on their mortgage but continued to pay and were well employed. So this program was created in order to provide them with an opportunity to refinance at today's prevailing rates. Remember before maybe their loan was at 6 or 7%, but now loan interest rates are a little bit lower, so they could take advantage of that. They just need to get qualified. If they can still qualify on their income for their mortgage amount, even if they are upside down on their mortgage, they can refinance. And this is for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac loans only. So in just a minute, I'll remind you about how to find out if your client has a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac loan. But this particular program, HARP 2.0, is for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac loan programs only. A big thing that's been in the news a lot is this Independent Foreclosure Review program. This is the one, the Attorney General settlement. It's independentforeclosurereview.com, and 4.2 million borrower people got money. I think a lot of it's lost in the mail right now in the last 6 months or so as part of the settlement, anywhere from $300,000 to $125,000, depending whether they were wrongfully foreclosed or whether there was some maybe slipshod work on their loan modification or their short sale of their home. So people may ask you about this. This is not something that any of us are able to obtain a lot of information about. I get emails all the time. How it was my father passed away. It wasn't his name. Now how do I get the check changed to my name? They have to contact a company called Rust Consulting, RUST Consulting, if they have any questions about independent foreclosure review. It's kind of like a big guarded secret, and that's where you get that information. Now, there are some streamlined modifications for FHA loans, and FHA short sales now have some streamlined programs. There was all sorts of hullabaloo a few weeks ago that you couldn't do dual agency, not even two agents from the same brokerage on an FHA short sale. So if a seller has an FHA loan, they were saying that nobody in the same brokerage could even bring the buyer to buy that property. But now National Association of Realtors didn't really like that very much, so they made some alternative suggestions, and the FHA did pull back on that requirement. And then the last thing, which is actually the first one on this list, is the HalfA program. And that's the one that we're going to talk about next because that's the biggest one impacting short sales. The HalfA program, again, stands for Home Affordable Foreclosure Alternatives. And it is a program that is through the Treasury, through the government. And it involves either short sale or deed in lieu of foreclosure options. So the first thing that happens is that you contact the short sale lender to find out if the seller will qualify for this program. And they will be able to identify, based on the kind of loan the seller has, whether they will in fact qualify for this program. Since like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they've got their own program, so they would not qualify for this program. So they look to see who owns the note and some other factors. I'm going to talk about deed in lieu at the end because that's a really unique animal. But so let me go through this list and then I'm going to talk about deed in lieu afterwards. All right, so once you've identified if it's a participating investor and they qualify, it can be an owner-occupied or tenant-occupied home. Now that is a change from the original plans with HalfA. There is a $3,000 incentive for the resident. So if it's tenant-occupied, the $3,000 goes to the tenant. And if it's owner-occupied, the $3,000 goes to the owner. They offer through HalfA up to $8,500 to the second lien holder. And then the second lien holder does have to agree to waive the right to pursue deficiency, which is great in all of these other states besides California where there are no anti-deficiency regulations. If a seller participates in HalfA, they do get that deficiency waived. And the really neat thing lately about the HalfA short sale is the positive credit reporting. So through HalfA, as of sometime last year, they offered a revision to how the credit was reported in the HalfA program. Now it's reported either account status code 13 or account status code 65. And those account status codes, one is for sellers that are current, and the other they imply that it's paid as agreed or paid in accordance with the settlement agreement. And that does have a much the impact on the credit is much less negative through those account status codes. And from sellers that I know that have participated and who have been current, they've had actually some really, they've been really pleased that their credit score has only decreased 35 to 45 points. So it's really something worth exploring if you're interested in learning more about that. So there are some so what happens again is you get qualified through the lender for the HalfA program. You're told by the lender to fill out some specific forms. You have to jump through a few hoops and provide some additional items. But then when the deal closes, a check is cut by the settlement company to the tenant or to the owner at closing for those $3,000. Now, the one thing I promised you that I'd talk about next is deed in lieu of foreclosure. People are under the impression in general that deed in lieu of foreclosure is as easy as saying, I am done with my house. They just clean it up they drop the keys on the kitchen table. Well, there's no table anymore, on the kitchen counter, excuse me. And then they, wash their hands, lock the door, and walk right out. Well, it's not quite that easy. In the HalfA program, deed in lieu of foreclosure is done the exact same way as a short sale. It's a process. You need to work with the lender on it. And you cannot do it if there is a second lien on the property. And in most cases, the lenders will make you do the short sale before you even attempt the deed in lieu of foreclosure. So it's not quite as easy as that. And the other caveat about the deed in lieu of foreclosure is if you meet someone who has basically left their keys on the counter and left, remember that they own the property until it is foreclosed on. So even, let's say the anticipated foreclosure date is December 1st, but the bank doesn't foreclose for whatever reason, and it's February 15th of 2014, and the bank still hasn't foreclosed, and then somebody climbs over the back fence, some kids, and one of them gets hurt. It is the seller that's going to have the liability there, since the seller still owns the home. The home is abandoned, but it's still in the seller's name until the bank forecloses. So I would urge you to discuss that if you meet anybody that's thinking about doing a deed in lieu of foreclosure or just walking away, that they be aware of all of the aspects on it, and if necessary, discuss those with an attorney. All right, so the third thing you're going to be asked about at your listing appointment, and these things, and just knowing this can instantly increase your respect, your ability to get the listing, in your listing appointment, are the tax and legal consequences of a short sale. When you can guide your seller towards speaking with the right attorney or accountant, getting the answers that they need quickly and efficiently, you're going to be much closer to a closing and a much more successful alliance that you create with your seller. Gotten 3 calls yesterday. Has the Mortgage Debt Relief Act been extended by the end of the year? Not yet. Do I know if it's going to be? I don't know. As of right now, that expires at the January 1st, 2014. And that is the act that provides certain protection to certain short sale sellers on their primary residence for their first liens, where they wouldn't, the lender cannot they are not taxed for the amount of the debt forgiven. Now, some states do have state debt relief that matches the Mortgage Debt Relief Act. At this time, California does not. They were that was called AB 30, and it has not been signed into law yet. And so we might be looking at next year before the assembly meets again and the governor signs that into law. And what they say is that if he does, then it will be retroactive for all of 2013. But be aware, if you live in California, that we do not have state debt relief in the same way that the Mortgage Debt Relief Act protects at the federal level. And so you would want to make sure that sellers are aware of that. A third thing that comes up quite frequently is with respect to the short sale approval letter. When you finally get your short sale approval letter, I know you will do a happy dance like no other, because they're so challenging to obtain and it's so much hard work. You will want to make sure that the seller reads every line of that letter immediately when you get it. Oftentimes they have questions about the legal language in there, and they will want to make sure to be well protected so that the bank can't come after them after closing, particularly if you live outside of California. And so really that's a great opportunity for the seller to ask an attorney to look at that letter as well. In our office, we frequently had attorneys have some questions about the language in the letter, and it's not actually been particularly difficult to go back to the bank and ask them to clarify some of the sentences or implications of the approval letter. So, that's an area where you're going to want to probably have the client speak with an attorney. And I also want to remind you that it's important to use the correct real estate contracts when working short sales. In California, we have a short sale information and advisory. That's an SSIA form. It needs to be signed by the buyer and the seller. There's also a short sale addendum. Now, additionally, one form that I don't see a lot of is the Notice of Default Purchase Agreement. And remember that the Notice of Default Purchase Agreement in the state of California is to be used if an investor is buying an owner-occupied home and there's already a notice of default, so it's in active foreclosure, then that you need to write the contract on the Notice of Default Purchase Agreement. And then the fifth point, and this is huge, and this will probably come up as early as the listing agreement. If a seller is not really, or a borrower is not really 100% on board yet with selling their house, they're trying to think of ways that they can stay. So they're often asking questions like, can my uncle buy it and rent it back to me? Can my sister buy it and rent it back to me? And those are the kinds of things that the bank really frowns upon. And most of the short sale lenders have something called an arm's length affidavit. It's a bank addenda, which specifically says that none of the parties to the transaction have any business relationship with any other party outside of what's already been disclosed to the short sale lenders. So that's for the same reason why banks don't like agents to represent themselves, or like nobody would want me to represent my son as a buyer or as a seller in a transaction. These are the things the bank really wants to avoid. And they do look very carefully into this. So if an entity is buying or selling a property, they will ask to see who are all the signatories of the entity. So it could be an LLC or a trust. And they may see that one of them is also the listing agent, and they will not have anything to do with it. I've actually seen one deal in Equator get closed out and declined when it was about 3 days from closing because the bank discovered that the buyer was an entity, but they were being represented by an agent who was part of the entity. So they do look, not all the time, but they do, and you wouldn't want to get into any trouble for signing that and being involved in something that the bank is frowning upon. So be very, very aware of those affidavits when they come out. And if somebody asks you if they can do that, it's generally not recommended. So as far as now, let's talk about the major players. This is another thing that you're going to be asked about at the listing appointment, and having this knowledge is going to be really, really helpful in cementing getting a short sale listing. How long does it take for Equator to process a short sale? My second lien holder is a credit union. Are they going to approve the short sale? What kind of hardship requirements do I need for Bank of America? Things like that. So just knowing the answers to those questions really shows your professionalism and your ability to, that you have the knowledge necessary to get their short sale approved, and you can create trust by sharing that knowledge. So Equator, probably most of you on the phone are familiar with Equator. It's the online processing platform for short sales, and it's used by all of these different lenders right now: Bank of America, Ocwen, NationStar, Chase, and Wells Fargo. In most, I would say 99.9% of the loans at all of those institutions, they are run through Equator. Some people hate Equator. Some people love Equator. The good thing is you can kind of see how the process is evolving, whether, what the time frames are, because everything is in this online platform, so there's more increased transparency. Each of these lenders uses it very differently. Some will send you messages outside of Equator. Some only communicate with you in Equator, and they don't want to talk on the telephone ever at all. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to create an Equator account, and then you go to equator.com, and then you would use that Equator account for any short sale at any of these banks being processed in Equator. So in one account, you could have Bank of America short sales, and NationStar short sales, and Chase short sales. So you can have all of them in one account, and you'll notice as you begin to work on them that they're all a little bit different. So, but Equator does increase the efficiency a little bit, unless there's a technical glitch or a problem that you need to handle offline. But it does, because you get these tasks, they're auto-generated, and you can upload things, and then you don't have to worry, well, I faxed my 20-page offer to the bank, but did they get it? Even though you have a confirmation, you don't really know if it got into your negotiator's hands. In this way, you that anxiety is diminished. Other banks that come up a lot and people ask about are SPS, Chase, and Citibank. And those three banks are still offering some incentives to certain borrowers, particularly on loans owned by Chase, Citi, and SPS, up to $20,000, $30,000. Now, what generally happens, and this is why I always tell borrowers, yes, please open your mail. Mail is very scary if you're facing foreclosure, because you never know what's going to come in the mail. But good things do come in the mail when it comes to loss mitigation. I have seen in the last 3 or 4 months, 3 letters that sellers have gotten in the mail that their second lien, their second mortgage has been wiped out completely. So all of a sudden they went from selling their house to now, because they were underwater, to now having some equity in their house. Another good thing that comes in the mail is an offer for a large incentive. The only way you're going to know that is if you open your mail. So Citi will send out a letter, and it might say, if you list your home for short sale, you'll be eligible for up to $20,000 in incentive money, but you need to list it by December 1st, and you need to follow the following guidelines, which generally involve faxing them a copy of the listing agreement, something like that. So really encourage sellers to open the mail. So, and those, like I said, Chase does their short sales through Equator. The other ones do not. Now, credit unions and collection companies, they are definitely very, very challenging. Credit unions operate very differently from large banks in that their corporate structure causes them to feel everything much more personally. Their guidelines are much more strict when it comes to approving short sales. In our office, we have gotten many short sales approved for sellers who are current at Wells Fargo, Bank of America, NationStar, Chase, Citi, but much less success with that at credit unions. They look at every expense the seller has, and if they don't think it's a good, logical, qualifying expense, like maybe saving a little money for your kid's college, they will say, I don't care about that. They shouldn't be saving for that. They should be putting it into their mortgage. So if your seller has kind of a borderline hardship, or maybe not so great of a hardship, but just wants to sell just because they're tired of it, they don't like the mortgage that they're in, and they need to do a short sale, and they do have their loan with the credit union, you should probably make them aware that it might be a slightly more challenging short sale. And then I haven't seen too many lately, but we do often see collection companies in the second position. They are not as agreeable to take $3,000 or $5,000, which is generally what the big banks will take in a short sale. So if you come up with a collection company as your second lien holder, know that it's going to be a little bit of a roller coaster ride. A couple of other banks that are pretty challenging in the second position are PNC, as I mentioned much earlier in the presentation, unless it's a half a short sale. If it's a half a short sale, they'll be okay, but oftentimes they'll ask for $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in the second position. And another one that we've had some problems with lately is First Tennessee Bank, and they are asking for $50,000, $60,000 in the second position, and that's very difficult to get the first lien holder to pay. So those are the banks that you'll want to be aware of. And if your seller asks you about them and what your experience is, then you can give them that information. We hear a lot in the news about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Now, the first thing that you're going to want to do is check whether your borrower or seller has a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac loan. And you can do that by going on the Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac website. It'll be fanniemae.com/loan lookup, or on the Freddie Mac homepage, there's actually a button that says, does Freddie Mac own your mortgage? You would put in the address and the last 4 of the seller's social security number, and it will say the words match found or no match found. And if it says match found, then the loan is owned by either Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, depending on which site you're on. Now, one thing that's really interesting about Fannie Mae and you'll want to be aware of is if you have one of these sellers that's missed over 12 payments, Fannie Mae may not want to postpone a foreclosure to do a short sale. So you will want to make your seller aware of that. They do have some specific policies about their processing, and if it's over 12 months late, they do reserve the right to make a decision like that. They also have some there's been some stuff in the news about Fannie Mae. They like to sell their REO properties, their foreclosed properties, using a home path loan, which does not require an appraisal. So they can sell it as slightly maybe higher, a little bit higher than market value sometimes. So if you are working on a Fannie Mae short sale and you get a counter offer from Fannie Mae, well, you would be working through the servicer, but you would get the counter offer, and it seems like really high compared to what you perceive the value to be. And that kind of is because Fannie Mae knows that if they go to foreclosure, they could probably get more. But they do, because so many people complained about this, they have a website. It's the Fannie Mae Escalation Desk, and you can upload your items directly to Fannie Mae and have your value dispute reviewed directly by Fannie Mae. You don't have to go through your servicer in order to do that. And in my experience, if you do a good job with that, you can get Fannie Mae to approve your short sale. In most of our short sales right now that we've gone through value dispute with Fannie Mae has agreed with the value dispute price that we wanted. So don't rule that out and don't give up if you're running into problems like that. But be aware that these are the challenges with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. They do, by the way, have their own version of the HalfA program, which does pay some assistance money up to $3,000. And the last thing that is so important to me, and I think should be so important to you, is the due diligence activities required when you take a listing. If you get the address in advance and you can have the time to go do some research, the first thing that I would do is try to get a copy, a preliminary title report or a property profile on the property. And on that, I would be looking at first thing I would look at is who is the owner. So if it says that the property's in a trust, you're going to want to take the listing in the name of the trust. But then if it says that the owner is a male, but it was a female that called you to set a listing appointment, you're going to need to make sure that all those people are there at that appointment. And you're going to want to see, of course, and we've already talked about this, whether there is a notice of default on the property, a notice of sale, and those are the things that you would be able to see through the property profile, because you would see a copy of that notice of default, and you can look at the date to see when it was filed. So if it was filed yesterday and you're in California, you know that you have 3 months and 3 weeks to get the job done. But if you look it up and the notice of trustee sale shows a date of sale for next week, you might want to reassess whether you want to take this listing. Oftentimes, I would tell a seller like that, why don't they call the bank and ask them if the bank would be willing to postpone the sale date to do a short sale? And if the bank says yes and postpones the date, then I would be more than happy to do the short sale listing, because you can spend hours and hours working on that postponement, and then the bank does not want to postpone the sale. But they are often open to doing that. So I wouldn't rule that out. I would just encourage you to get the seller involved in that. You will also want to learn about the lenders. So maybe you can ask about the lenders if you're on the phone before you go meet in person to sign the listing agreement. So you can figure out, is this going to be hard or easy? Is it Fannie Mae? If they've missed 12 payments, then we might have that problem that I just discussed. So stuff like that, you're going to want to do that research. And the next thing you're going to want to learn about is any other non-institutional liens, any possible bankruptcy or loan modification activity. If they're in the middle of a loan modification, they cannot do a short sale unless they cancel the loan modification. If they've filed for bankruptcy, then the property is going to have to be discharged from the bankruptcy, or you're going to have a letter from a court approving the sale of the property in order to do the short sale. But then this third thing, what I'm calling non-institutional liens, they can be a beast of burden. If there are HOA liens for $20,000, and we don't know if the short sale lender is going to want to pay those. If there's a $200,000 IRS tax lien, that's going to need to be something that needs to be addressed. If there's child support liens, revenue and recovery, city and county code violations. These are things that you are going to have to look into. How are they going to get paid at closing? Because a short sale can't close unless all of the liens are cleared. So some of them maybe have already been paid off. Maybe some are very small. Maybe the bank will agree to pay them. But often, more times than not, the bank is not going to want to pay an American Express bill or some of these other things that appear that are non-institutional, not mortgages that have been associated with the property. So it's good to look at that early, because once you get the short sale approved and you've got a month to close, maybe you can remove a tax lien, but it does generally take 4 to 6 weeks to do that. So it would be certainly a lot easier to work on that when you take the listing than, 3 weeks before closing, and then you'd have to postpone the closing date. So certainly something you would want to look into at the time of the listing. And the last thing that we're going to discuss today, and just probably one of the most crucial, is to assess the motivation of the seller. If you go to meet the seller and they do not want to show the document, their tax returns or their pay stubs or anything like that to the bank, or if they refuse to let people in to see the home, it's going to be difficult for you to do your job. Or if they can't turn over papers quickly that the bank might require, because sometimes the bank will call you on Thursday and say, I need it by Friday at noon. And if the seller can't get that to you, and they're going to close the file, and you might have to start all over again. So a highly motivated seller, somebody that's going to be very cooperative, that really wants to sell their home in a short sale and genuinely wants to support you by providing the documentation and making their home available when it needs to be available, is going to be the easiest seller to work with. And they're going to really, really help to increase your efficiency and your ability to close the short sales. So you can instantly increase your income by only working with motivated sellers, not those with a lot of liens on the property. I've seen some with 14 liens on the property. That deal's not going to close, but just really focusing on the kinds of deals that you know that you can get closed with time to do it without the foreclosure date, tomorrow or the next day. So those were really the 5 major things that you need to be aware of, that you were going to want to talk with sellers about, and that you will really help you to increase your game when it comes to working short sales. And a lot of this information, of course, you can translate to all sorts of other real estate activities that you're probably going to be working on in the rest of 2013 and 2014 as well. So that's pretty much all that I had to say for the webinar today. I wanted to thank you all for calling in. I'm going to take a few minutes now to answer the questions, so feel free to take your time to write in your questions if you haven't already done so, and I'd be more than happy to answer those as we move on. So, and if you need help processing short sales, or if you have any questions later, please take down our email address, info@shortsaleexpediter.com, and feel free to email us anytime, and someone on my staff does check that email and be more than happy to answer your questions. Okay, so with respect, here's the first question. Can I go over the credit reporting and HalfA? Yes, I can do that for you. So again, the positive credit reporting for HalfA is, that's something new. And again, what that is that the government has decided that any HalfA short sales would be reported on the credit report as account status code 13 or account status code 65. You can look those up and see what the exact language is, and you can show that to your seller, and it will show them what the how that would be reported. Thank you. Those of you that are leaving and saying thank you very much for joining me. Let me go on to the next question then. Okay, what is Fannie Mae HalfA? Okay. Fannie Mae has their own version of the HalfA program. It's got some similar qualifying guidelines, but it is a Fannie Mae program. But again, they do pay up to $3,000 in moving assistance money at closing, and so that's definitely worth looking into if your seller is has a Fannie Mae loan. Remember, you can check that on fanniemae.com/loan lookup. And if they qualify for that, that's great. $3,000 is very, very helpful. It will at least pay for the moving van and maybe your deposit on your rental. So that's really great. Okay, can I talk about Bank of America and Equator? Sure. Bank of America is the original user of Equator. It is my feeling that they use it the most efficiently of all of the lenders, but of course there are certainly times when it doesn't always work perfectly. But the neat thing is, and I'm glad that you asked this question, is that there's a little trick. And that is that you can use the shift key to highlight every person associated with the transaction to send a message. So for example, let's say your negotiator doesn't get back to you in 2 days. Then you see it says team leader, vice president, all these other people. Well, you can really just highlight them all and you can say, hey, I need some help. Things aren't happening or proceeding as quickly and efficiently as possible. Please get back to me. And that really encourages the person that you're working with to get back to you very quickly and efficiently. So in most cases, I've found that that is very, very helpful. And for the few of you that are still on the line right now, because people are hanging up, here's a top secret tip with regard to Bank of America. If you are having trouble with the Bank of America short sale, if you go on Twitter, and I think their Twitter is @BofAHelp, and you send a message, you will get a response. You will not believe how quickly you get a response. Bank of America has a really impressive social media team. They do not want any negative publicity. And so if you want to call back, you can send a sweet note implying that you're having some struggles. So of course your next message is not going to be quite so sweet, and you will get a call back fast from some wonderful, helpful people that can help you get the job done. So thank you again for all of you that have stayed on for the webinar today. I hope that I gave you some tips that also can help you get the job done. And feel free to reach out to us if you have any further questions about short sales, or of course, if you ever are considering looking for short sale processing team, I hope that you will consider Short Sale Expediter. And again, for those of you still on the line asking, we do our webinars every 2 weeks. You can sign up for them at shortsaleexpediter.com/events. There are multiple different topics, and this one today was recorded, so you can listen to it. It'll be up on the site soon, and you will be able to listen to it and get, take notes if you need to and stuff like that. Although please remember, if you listen to this specific webinar, this is very dated material. So if you're listening to it in January, today is November 7th, then really the key is that some of the information might be dated, but you are welcome to join us anytime. We love to have you, and just thank you so much. Best wishes to you for great success in whatever you're doing, short sales and beyond, in 2014. Thank you.